There was once a time, many millions of Volkswagens ago, when there were no cars on our roads with streamlining and low fuel consumption. None based on trend-setting technology with indestructible engines. There were no cars with proverbial reliability and unmistakable styling. None which everyone could afford, and none which promised mobility to all. Motoring was an expensive pleasure and an exhausting adventure into the bargain. In America and France, cars were already rolling off the production line. But in Germany, too many small firms were involved in low-volume car production using uneconomical methods. To us, the car was a status symbol and mass mobility was a foreign term. But there was one man who was ahead of his time. Ferdinand Porsche, a brilliant inventor and designer. As early as 1932, the beetle-shaped nose of his NSU prototype clashed with the prevailing sense of style and technical understanding. 2 years later, Porsche submitted his design for a people's car to the government of the Reich. A cheap, economical car using advanced but problem-free techniques. And in 1936, the Beetle learned to run. Porsche used the prototypes to try out the best techniques for producing a good basic car which would cost less than 1,000 Reichsmarks. The development work on the car for all attracted growing interest from the then brown-shirted authorities. Grand Trial Run 1936, distance 50,000 kilometers. The arrival of the prototypes was awaited on Porsche's private estate in Stuttgart. They passed the tough tests in preparation for mass production, for which the Nazis were impatiently pressing because Dr. Porsche's Volkswagen fitted in with their ideology. The German Labour Front also adopted the Volkswagen project, not least in order to create jobs. In 1938, the foundation stone for the Volkswagen factory was laid near Fallersleben. The newsreel commentator described the car and factory in a style typical of the time. Dr. Porsche has designed a saloon, an open-top car and a convertible which, with a fuel consumption of 6 to 7 litres and a cruising speed of 100 kilometres per hour, will cost only 990 marks. The first stage of the Volkswagen factory is nearing completion. The workers in the Volkswagen factory will have the use of the finest restrooms, showers and sports grounds. And so it's not merely the technical equipment in the factory, but also the social facilities provided for the labour force which are unique in the world. But the finished Volkswagen was only running up propaganda under another name. Even foreign journalists were won over by the KDF car. They were amazed by its low petrol consumption of only 6.5 litres, its rapid acceleration from 0 to 60 kilometres per hour in 14 seconds, and by its outstanding road holding and 4-speed gearbox.
C'est une trouvaille et nous espérons vraiment qu'elle aura grand succès.
nach Volkswagen. Die durch eine besonders tiefe Schwerpunktslage erreicht wird.
F-Wagen kamen zur Besichtigung nach Berlin. Jeder des Volkswagenwerkes vorbehaltlos bewundert.
In order to keep the price of the car artificially low for political reasons, the KDF, or Strength Through Joy organization, took over the job of distributing it. Fully believing in the promise of mobility for all, 336,000 savers stuck stamp upon stamp onto savings cards, which often didn't bear the prospective year of delivery, yet none of the savers got his car. For the Volkswagen factory was producing what was needed at that time: amphibious and jeep-type vehicles and munitions for the war. For the time being, the Volkswagen ideal foundered under the Nazis. In 1944, 2/3 of the factory had been destroyed by bombs. There was once a time, and it was not that long ago, when our roads had been destroyed, when people were starving in bombed-out houses, and when nobody would have dared to dream that cars would ever be driven again. Cars with streamlining and trend-setting technology. Cars with low fuel consumption and proverbial reliability, which anyone could afford and which could give mobility to all. Anything that still had four wheels and an engine was taken over by the Allied military government and used to transport essential goods.
And then put to use where it is most urgently needed. Gasoline is provided from captured German stocks.
Private motor cars were not being produced, and even the Volkswagen factory was due to be dismantled. But it was spared under the leadership of Major Hurst from Great Britain. His attempts to attract foreign interests at the factory failed. Even Henry Ford declined. But production got off the ground with an order for 10,000 Beetles for the occupying powers, and the labour force went back to work despite privation and hunger.
There was one of the pre-production prototypes at the factory. Nobody knew who it belonged to, so I had that one painted army khaki green and sent up to Rhine Army headquarters as a demonstrator. And within a week we had an order for 20,000 cars. The physical state of the factory was terrible. Roofs off. The big presses were there. The roof was off the press shop. But the presses themselves were deemed to be repairable, and the press tools for the Beetle body were still there. Production stumbled along over the first winter. By March of 1946, we had got our target not set by higher authority or by anybody, but by availability of supplies. That target was 1,000 cars a month. I left in 49. I had the uncomfortable job of staying there as a safety net under Nordhoff. I admired Nordhoff a lot. I wouldn't say I liked him as an individual. We got on all right. They offered me a car and then tried to give one to my wife. And, of course, I couldn't accept it. I did let it be known through a secretary that I wouldn't mind a little model, thinking perhaps two-room apprentices might make a desktop model. And in the event, I heard that a rather nice model was being made, so I said, hey, we'd better have one for my boss as well, Charles Ratcliffe, chairman of the board at headquarters. And Nordhoff said, well, I'll have one too, so 3 were built.
At a time marked by the fight for survival, the newsreels reported in 1946 the recommencement of operations at the renamed Wolfsburg factory. Cars are once again being produced on the production line of the former Fallersleben Volkswagen factory. The factory and its ancillary operations employ around 18,000 people. Orders and raw materials are guaranteed for a good time to come. Initially, the cars will be distributed by the military authorities to their own services and to essential German organizations. At the beginning of 1948, Heinrich Nordhoff takes over the management of the Volkswagen factory. Shortly afterwards, the 20,000th Beetle rolls off the production line during the tense days of the Berlin blockade. Volkswagens are flown to Berlin from the British airfield of Wunsdorf near Hanover. Fresh from the factory, the cars are loaded straight into the belly of the aircraft. In 1949, the British hand over Volkswagen Werk GmbH to the federal government. The series of production records begins under Heinrich Nordhoff's motivating management. Ten years after this advertising film of the 30s was produced, promising a car for everyone, Ferdinand Porsche's concept of a fast, economical, problem-free people's car finally becomes reality. And the indestructible, horizontally opposed 4-cylinder rear engine, whose principle of air cooling is illustrated by this old clip of film, becomes the basis of the Beetle's success. Indeed, the driving force behind the economic recovery. Images of the 50s. Hula hoops are the new craze, which from its early stages has now reached epidemic proportions. During his tour of the largest automobile factory in Europe, the Federal Chancellor was visibly impressed by the efforts of the 27,000 employees. Football manager Sepp Herberger is carried away by a surge of enthusiasm. Germany has finally grasped the crown of football. At the Brenner Pass, the floodgates are opening on Italy. The sunny peninsula is recording record numbers of visitors from Germany. (1955). The million celebrations are a modern expression of pride and self-awareness. The whole of the economic miracle nation celebrates this success. And the world of the Volkswagen joins in too. That was a look at the world which the Volkswagen has conquered and will continue to conquer. One car actually won over the hearts of people throughout the world, and quite understandably.
Differently shaped in most American cars.
In the year of the million celebrations, the Beetle was shown to the astonished American viewing public as a symbol of the German economic miracle.
World economy since World War II.
Something that's virtually unknown today. Nordhoff had already bought a factory in New Jersey by 1955. He allays fears of competition. The US market is large enough for small cars. Initially, nothing is done with the factory. Nevertheless, the country which follows with respect the boom of the label Made in Germany becomes its main export market. Modest beginnings. In 1948, the military government exhibits the Beetle in New York. Exports mean foreign currency. They'll bring in 21 million marks this year. The Beetle is also on show at the Hanover Fair. The Hanover Fair is the meeting place for German business people and trade experts from abroad and is the gateway to exports. 2 years after the end of the war, Hon brothers lay the foundations for the export success of the Volkswagen, whose world soon knew no boundaries, with 56 saloons for Holland. Subsidiary companies are founded at an early stage. In 1953, Volkswagen sets up VW do Brasil, today the largest car plant in Latin America. The company's overseas commitment opens up inaccessible markets and provides active development aid. But to return to home. The film clip of that time shows the constantly expanding customer service network as the backbone of the demand for Beetles, which was growing by leaps and bounds. Slow delivery and a grey market are signs of the time. The original factory, which was completely rebuilt in Wolfsburg in 1950, is bursting at the seams despite the constant modernization of production methods. Branch factories are built in Hanover and Kassel, and later in Emden and Salzgitter. The 5 millionth Volkswagen is completed at the beginning of the 60s. And it goes and goes. In the meantime, stockholders have also begun to profit from the company's success. Volkswagen Werk AG develops into a thriving corporate group. Federal Minister Wilhelmi transferred Volkswagen Werk into public hands with the issue of Volkswagen shares to 1.5 million buyers. Shareholder meetings and dream dividends are signs of that time. There was once a time when the Volkswagen was felt to be capable of anything. In advertising films, at least, it overtakes sports cars and pulls whole lorry-trailer combinations. And from the start, the legend of the Wonder Beetle is passed on to its brothers, the convertible and the commercial. The Volkswagen's big brother, for use as a delivery van, a special-purpose vehicle, an 8-seater bus or a mobile shop. As in the car, the engine is at the rear. A 1950 newsreel. The commercial is also celebrating production records and is demonstrating its clan's reliability on roads throughout the world. The world's most popular convertible and the Carmen Ghia in a brochure style typical of that time. Advertising makes history. The production range is extended at the beginning of the 60s. The 1500 and 1600, technically related to the Beetle, are designed to satisfy the demand for a larger Volkswagen. They succeed, but the Beetle remains the favorite and is far more than just a car.
Sofort raus!
Achtung, Entschluss!
From Hollywood to the Lüneburg Heath, the genuine somersault test shows just how much safety the car offers. One explanation for the Beetle's success lies in the constant improvement in quality. Seal test, 1948. The test methods used become stricter and stricter, and over 2,000 improvements are made. But even though the Beetle meets the needs of its time, the call for a successor and a wider range of models becomes louder and louder.
Höhne hat uns ein neues Produktionsprogramm vorgelegt und will nun anhand von Bias uns das etwas erklären.
In 1968, Kurt Lotz succeeds the late Heinrich Nordhoff.
Des Unternehmens, und hier kommt es ja wohl in erster Linie auf Forschung und Entwicklung an.
The K70 comes onto the market in 1970. But despite its up-to-date design, the first water-cooled Volkswagen is not a lasting success. Nor is the 411. The search for a successor to the Beetle continues. A change in Wolfsburg at a difficult time. Rudolf Leiding on the pressing problem of the model range. After this interim solution, a final model range has to be built up on a long-term basis. The Passat arrives in 1973 as the first type in a new generation of models with front-wheel drive and trend-setting technology. But its life begins in the middle of a worldwide recession and the energy crisis. In 1974, the group's losses amount to over 800 million marks. There was a time, a few years ago, when crisis talk was at such a pitch that the future of the motor vehicle itself seemed to be in danger. Material from that time. A television interview with the new chairman, Tony Schmücker, when taking up office. Do you feel that you've taken over command during the most difficult crisis of the German economy? This was not only confirmed by the chairman of the supervisory board at the press conference, I have no illusions about it either. Is a tough program of cuts involving staff and dealers necessary? If you recall the losses which the chairman of the supervisory board announced today, then I think the answer to your question is clear, namely, yes. But the expenditure of millions on developing the new production range using the latest technology pays off. The Golf, which appears in the crisis year of 1974, is the turning point. It's a success from the beginning. Group losses are more than offset. The new generation of models, Passat, Scirocco, Golf and Polo, sets the trend for motor car design of the future. In 1976, after a great deal of thought had been given to securing the important American market, the Westmoreland factory was built. In the same year, the Golf reached the million mark at home. But what about the Beetle? The last Beetle came off the production line on the 19th of January 1978. One day later, the first cars arrived from Mexico. The Beetle is the all-time world champion. No other car has been built in such numbers. But the new products are catching up. Above all, the Golf has achieved numbers that are reminiscent of the best periods of the Beetle. Like the Beetle did in its day, the Golf is now showing a clean pair of heels to the field, not only on the road, but in its production figures. The first million Golfs were produced in 31 months. 5 million Beetles in 17 years. 5 million Golfs in 8 years. The Golf changes its face, but its technology too is developing faster than the Beetles. The engine, the running gear, the comfort. Its basic concept was futuristic even when it first appeared. Only in this way can a car keep step with technical development today, or indeed be way ahead of it. For Europe, 1985 is the last Beetle year. As of today, it will no longer be imported. After half a century, European automotive technology has overtaken it. The faithful companion of many millions of people has become a part of motoring history. A part of history, though, that most people like to remember. They connect it with memories of a time when maybe they themselves were just learning to walk. Today, we smile at how the Beetle learned to walk.
And this is where we go. Exciting sounding names like Mombasa and Dar es Salaam in the humid heat of the coastal district, and snow-capped Mount Kilimanjaro. 3 territories, Kenya, Tanganyika, Uganda, are traversed during the 4 days and 2 nights of the safari, with a night's rest at Nairobi in between. The start from 6 to 9:30 a.m. on Good Friday. Good for those who weren't competing. We leave Nairobi with the type of starting ramp made famous by the Mille Media. Though Castagnetto's bowler hat is not there, little else is missing, for this virtually is a race. For production saloon cars, in production line condition. No deviations from standard are allowed, as in this way the organizers feel that the buying public will get a better idea of the relative toughness and suitability for local conditions of the various makes. On this 1,400-mile northern leg, confined largely to Uganda, the countryside is much greener, much more wooded, much more prosperous looking as these native huts, pride of some district commissioner, jest. But again, it's a case of too much scenery and too little time. And there goes the silent passenger again. An Indian-entered Volkswagen pulls up at the Embu control to have the roadbook stamped with its time of arrival. How different all this is from bundling out of the car into the snow and ice of the Monte Carlo rally to check in during the mountain circuit. But time in the safari is just as vital a factor. The next section, to the Meru control, with its 180 hairpin corners in 92 miles, its dust or dust turned to mud beneath the dripping trees, and its average speed of 40 miles an hour, is considered one of the most demanding of the rally. Here, the alpine-like terrain sorts out the sheep from the goats, both of which take every opportunity of getting in the way. There remain only 350 miles before the finish at Nairobi. Cars and drivers are tired, and further points have been lost during the night. The Mercedes of Thomas and Lead, having led the safari comfortably for so far, is out of the running after brake failure on a tricky escarpment. And another Mercedes, driven by Fritschie and Ellis, takes over the lead, with the Scott Davis Ford Zephyr close astern. And now begins the final leg, the relatively easy roads and the battle against sleep. But some still have their troubles, including the 2 Indian drivers of Volkswagen number 57. It's good enough. It'll keep going for another 300 miles. Off we go. The Volkswagen in the rally again hurries on past the Weeping Rock, one of Africa's few damp spots being sighted on top of a spring. And another Indian entry, the Patel Singh Volkswagen speeds on its way through a maize plantation to Nairobi, and second place in the class for cars costing up to £625. The appalling road surfaces are over, though the dust is still there, on the long, straight road southwards to Nairobi. Far from the finish still, the crowds begin to line the route. The crowds stir and surge forward as the first arrival, Fini's Peugeot 203, completes its grueling journey to win the class for cars costing up to £625.
We make cars here, a great many cars. Each is exactly like every other until they get into the hands of their owners. Then they suddenly become intensely individual. His car, a very personal thing and unique. But even so, they aren't all for sale. They are so much alike that what we learn from one applies to the rest, which is the reason this one or that one is pulled off at random and tested, so that all those different people and places and problems which are still to come are taken care of in advance. Brakes are tested on a machine which costs more than 1,000 cars. We invent conditions for cars and parts of cars, more strenuous than any terrain, more illogical than any driver. Few things are standard the world over. Volkswagen is one of them. It is a word in every language, a useful object in every latitude. It was to begin with an idea whose time had come, the exploding need of man to move toward each other, to get their work done, their needs filled, their horizons stretched. The assembly line starts here. New designs for new tools and new dies. Old skills handed on to young men. Skill, care, the gradual growth of experience. The plan on paper becomes a metal shape as the machine translates what some human hand and eye and mind have dictated. Each die is a concept, separately thought through on a drafting table. Each stamping must fit into the car it meets when it comes to that place on the line. For a door to fit not one car, but any car, takes unimaginable force, exercised with unbelievable accuracy. One die must stamp 100,000 roofs, the last exactly like the first. car maker has problems besides those of production. Success is a problem. Cars add to the smog of our industrial world. In many areas, there are laws now that cars must control their exhausts, burn their fuel better. America was first and with the toughest rules. 6,000 miles from the Hollywood freeway, Volkswagen engineers recreated these conditions, measured them with American instruments, found out how to meet those standards and surpass them. Those little holes are instructions. Machines can do almost anything. Some can even make decisions. But the ideas must be brought to the machines, and then good ideas are used over and over again, leaving the men who had them to go on coming up with new ones. An engine, when assembled, turns the heat of burning gasoline into power. The force of these explosions, about 100 a second, moves parts so intimately connected with other parts that shafts will move and wheels turn. To do it, this engine needs 7 bits of information, among them temperature, pressure, load, and speed of travel. This engine has its own computer to direct its performance and create the most efficient fuel feed ever designed. Each engine is designed for one purpose, to move a specific car in traffic or across flatlands or even through remote mountain regions. Before an engine goes into a car, it is inspected and tested repeatedly for mechanical performance and power output. Everybody knows about machines. They are extensions of human power. A machine can do what a dozen or a score or 100 men can do. What not enough people appreciate is that machines are expressions of human genius. A man couldn't do this taking 100 times as long. 100 men couldn't do it in the same time. What the man can do is design the machine. This, then, is what modern man has come to be. There are those romantics who regret the passing of the horse-drawn carriage, of the hand craftsman working by himself in his workshop. But in those days, traveling from town to town exhausted the body and depressed the spirit. And the romantic hand craftsman worked 12 hours, 7 days. The better life starts with the skill of the designer, with the conquest of time so that each component arrives at its assigned place at its exact moment. Reliable, inexpensive transportation is the first step in the enjoyment of the new leisure. It gives a man more time for himself and makes him free. Before you can produce a transmission for thousands of cars and millions of drivers, the transmission itself must be tested against a machine which does to it what a bad road or a car full of people or a steep hill or all of them together will do. The car takes shape. Thousands of welds, all in the precisely right place, every time, as only a machine is capable of achieving it, will hold the shape on freeways and jungle trails, over cobblestones and the washboard floors of desert. The form is complete. There are details still to be finished by hand even after the finest machine process. Paint is more than color. When a car is likely to go anywhere, it must be ready to withstand everywhere. The car which will be bought to cross the muskeg of the Canadian North must be just as able to stand up to the swirling dusts of southern India or the snow-melting salts of New York City. Not every car will need this much protection, but they all get it. It's the only way to be sure. The first coat must be perfectly smooth to make a base for the other coats to follow. Painting is an old trade, but doing it this well takes science and design and technology, like this electrostatic process. The car body is given an electric charge which attracts particles of paint with absolute evenness, such as no brush or spray gun could impart. A man wants a car to last. He thinks paying for it once is enough. For his sake, the parts are tortured to ensure that his wipers will survive more rain than he will ever encounter. His windows will always open when he wants them to. His neighbors on the road will know which way he's headed, through all kinds of weather. that his engine starts when he needs it. And when he's about to stop, the lady behind him will know it. What's important here is that every piece is going somewhere, that it will be there at exactly the time to meet the other pieces. A man once said that mass production is one gigantic rendezvous. Waiting outside the factory, a world full of drivers. French drivers who must have yellow headlights. For the United States, special tail lights and sealed beam headlights. Behind these, the line keeps turning out more cars for America and cars tailor-made to the laws of Zanzibar, Spain, Hungary, Sweden, and the Leeward Islands. One every 8 seconds. Each car the result of the care and engineering quality that produced it. To learn what happens to a car in a rainstorm, a suction hose duplicates the vacuum which highway speeds induce inside. Testing must be relevant to the real problems, as in this smog test. What the skill of the engineers promised in the laboratory must become routine and continue to be fulfilled on the production line. There are factories to serve other factories. This one in Kassel provides transmissions to go into cars which are built in 3 other cities. Out of this picturesque German city of Emden come half the Volkswagen sold in the United States. Once famous for building ships, its citizens now build the cars to fill the ships. Other factories contribute, like this one in Ingolstadt and the one in Braunschweig. It started here in Wolfsburg, and how it has grown. Not only here, but in the many countries where Volkswagen has come to mean personal transportation.
Para resistir la intensa actividad cotidiana, es un corazón siempre joven, nunca falla. De todo corazón, el Volkswagen, la mejor compra.
In 1949, there were only 2 Volkswagens in America.
Have you ever wondered how the man who drives a snowplow drives to the snowplow? This one drives a Volkswagen. So you can stop wondering.
The Volkswagen Carbon Ghia is the most economical sports car you can buy. It's just not the most powerful.
At Volkswagen, we don't worry about how our car looks. We worry about how it works. So every day for the past 25 years, we've been testing and torturing things like door hinges and hood locks, seats, and shock absorbers. No other car goes through so much for so little. Mr. Jones and Mr. Krempler were neighbors. They each had $3,000. With his money, Mr. Jones bought himself a $3,000 car. With his money, Mr. Krempler bought himself a new refrigerator, a new range, a new washer, a new dryer, a record player, 2 new television sets, and a brand new Volkswagen. Now Mr. Jones is faced with that age-old problem, keeping up with the Kremplers.
Try looking at the Volkswagen this way. Sealed steel bottom that leaves little exposed to the elements. The Volkswagen's built to take a little punishment, all right. Small as it is, it's covered with up to 13 pounds of paint. Outside and in, even in places you can't see, but corrosion confined. In fact, the VW is so well put together, it's practically airtight. Now, what other car gives you that kind of quality at this kind of price?
Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, meep. Meep, 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 meep.
El Volkswagen, la mejor compra. Usted ya lo conoce. Por resistente, confiable y aguantador, el Volkswagen Sedán sigue siendo la mejor compra. Con Volkswagen, usted sabe lo que tiene.
vida funcionan tan bien como un Volkswagen.
Durante la conquista del oeste, este hombre cruzó profundas cañadas, ríos caudalosos, extensas llanuras, fangosas praderas, escarpadas montañas y desiertos interminables. Si este hombre hubiera realizado sus hazañas en automóvil, ¿cuál cree que habría escogido?
Es bueno recordarlo. Volkswagen, la mejor compra.